Whit Weeks is returning and the transfer portal is open. It's Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Thank you for helping make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check out the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA happy hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So the day before New Year's Day, the day before the transfer portal opened, brought a slew of announcements from LSU about players returning for next season. And candidly, it is odd to see announcements about your current players saying they're staying. But that is the current state of college football. If you're an everydayer, and shout out, you've heard me say over and over, we've got to reframe our minds in the way we think about college football, because every year is free agency. Every year, every player can leave. And you don't have to like it. I don't have to like it. Whatever. That's not what's really at issue here. That's just the reality. And so you have to exist within that reality. And so this flood of returning announcements was odd, but LSU got a massive one early afternoon when Whit Weeks on his social media announced he is in fact returning for his 4th season in Baton Rouge. And this is massive because you've heard me say LSU has prioritized 5 players. And that's not to say only 5, but the 5 key players that they prioritized to get back are Whit Weeks, Harlem Berry, DJ Pickett, Braylon Moore, Trey'Dez Green, those 5. And then next would have been PJ Woodland, who, by the way, also announced that he's returning. We'll get to that in a second, though. So Whit Weeks sort of starting the day with great news for LSU was awesome. And I probably don't have to explain why this is such a big deal, but just for context, look, Whit Weeks came to LSU as a freshman and had an awesome season back in 2023. That was an atrocious defense, but when he was on the field, he made them better. Played 11 games with 3 starts, had 49 tackles as a freshman. And it got to the point in 2024. Remember, he started 11 games, played in all 13, but started 11. Remember, at the beginning of the season, they were starting Harold Perkins at off-ball linebacker. And Brian Kelly made a comment where he said, look, we just realized we have to get 40 on the field. He can't be part of a platoon. And so they made the decision to make Whit Weeks a starter at that point, and it made the defense better perpetually. Whit Weeks went on to be 2nd in the SEC with 125 tackles, 9th in America with 125 tackles. The 125 he had was the 8th highest total in a season in LSU football history. So a massive season. And then coming into this year, Whit Weeks was first team All SEC. Coming into this year, 2025, Whit Weeks was a preseason first-team All-American. He was on the Butkus watch list, all the things. We were expecting another monster season, and it just didn't manifest largely due to injury. So for this season, Whit Weeks, ends up playing in just 7 games on the season for the Tigers, basically, forgive me, 8 games, basically due to the injury. But if you really think about it, it was 7 because of the targeting penalty against Florida, where he only played 3 snaps. But in the 8 games where he played, he finished the season with just 31 tackles, 3 TFLs, and a sack. When he was out there, he was good. But it's also worth noting at the end of the season, he played just 17 snaps in that game against Western Kentucky. He played just over 30 snaps in the finale against Oklahoma, and then didn't play in the bowl game. But listen, we know Whit Weeks' credentials, but remember also at that position, West Weeks is gone to graduation. Harold Perkins also gone due to graduation. So if you had lost Whit as well to the NFL, you would have been replacing your entire linebacker core. And I know we saw Devon Keys and Tylen Singleton start the bowl game, and both made a lot of tackles. I mean, Devon Keys had 14 tackles in the game, but you also were little sort of thin in the middle. And the other part of this is the intangibles that Whit brings. Whit is your defensive captain. he is the heartbeat of the team. When he's out there, everyone's better. He's the communicator. It's all of those things that you and I know to be true that are hard to define, but it's a reason why you needed him back. And listen, in every sport, you want to be good up the middle. Like in baseball, you want to be good at catcher, middle infield, shortstop, second base, and center field. In football, you want to be good on offense at center and quarterback, and on defense, right up the middle at nose tackle if you have one, middle linebacker, and then at safety. And Whit Weeks, obviously, the captain of the defense, makes LSU better. So it was an incredible getting Whit Weeks to return. The other part of this, the other great news that LSU got was another one of those 5 I mentioned. You'd already found out that Harlem Berry was coming back. Well, Weeks, and then later in the evening, we found out DJ Pickett also returning. This felt like a foregone conclusion whenever Corey Raymond was retained. Had Blake Baker taken the Tulane job, and if a new defensive coordinator to come in, if Corey Raymond wasn't retained for whatever reason, I think this would have been maybe a bit more ambiguous. This would have been tougher. A tougher sell if Corey Raymond weren't here. But DJ Pickett came here to LSU to learn under Corey Raymond. It's something he said on the record. So not a surprise when Raymond stayed that Pickett would stay as well. And I want to remind you, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, but when you look at the PFF grades on the season, DJ Pickett was the 4th highest graded player on defense for LSU for the entire year. Mansour Delane was number 1. Deshaun Spears was number 2, Halsey number 3, and then DJ Pickett was the 4th highest graded player defensively, and he ended up playing 524 snaps. On the season, he was targeted 38 times. He allowed 20 receptions. He had 13 stops. I mean, he was really good for LSU as a freshman in the secondary. So getting an elite level corner, especially when you're losing Mansour Delane, now you're plug and play. Woodland and Pickett are your starters. And that was the other news that LSU got. Again, as this sort of flood of returning announcements started to come out, Weeks and Pickett were kind of at the top of the list, but we also ended up, learning more guys that were ultimately deciding that they were going to return as LSU had this sort of flood of announcements of players returning. So DJ Pickett, PJ Woodland, Aiden Anding, again, a guy who didn't really even play very much as his freshman season, but he's coming back for year 2. Jakeem Jackson also returning, the Florida transfer. So very likely where you look at Pickett, Woodland as your starters, and then Jakeem Jackson, very likely your nickel. Michael Turner, along with Aiden Anding, also returning. So this was sort of the flood of announcements. Zach Weeks, we also learned they announced. Charles Ross announced that he's coming back for another season at linebacker. So again, it was odd to see this flood of announcements of players that you just assumed, of course, they would be back. But ultimately, it's a little shine for those guys. It's LSU maintaining its roster based on the evaluations they've gone through. But the big ones, obviously, are Whit Weeks and DJ Pickett. Now, there were some announcements to the contrary here as LSU lost a few players to the transfer portal and some that probably have you scratching your head. So I want to talk about that, including Kyle Parker at the top of the list. And as Ole Miss has beaten Georgia and advanced to the college football playoff semifinal, what does this mean for some of the LSU, the Ole Miss targets that LSU has that are supposed to enter the transfer portal and end up in Baton Rouge? We'll get to all of that as we continue here, Locked on LSU, your team every day. Let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rougiette Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rougiette Ready is a next-generation prescription treatment created to support both brain and body, so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rougiette Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. Most men ready in about 15 minutes on average, so you can stay present, confident, and in control when the moment is right. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now is the time. Head to Rougiette.com/lockedoncollege. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rougiette Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. want to get into some of the players that are leaving LSU. It was announced via the transfer portal. But before we do that, I want to thank you, as always, for making Locked On LSU your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And I want to encourage you to go check out the new Everydayer Club. Gives you access to an ad-free audio feed of Locked On LSU, compatible with Apple, Spotify, and all the major podcast apps. And an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. So tap the link in the show notes to learn more. So obviously the big news with Weeks and Pickett returning. The disappointing news, however, for a lot of Tiger fans, and maybe a bit surprising news that came down on Thursday, on New Year's Day, was Kyle Parker joining the list of LSU players intending to enter the transfer portal. Now, he wasn't alone. I'll talk about some of the other players who maybe are less impactful in just a second. But Parker, I think, was the surprising one for a lot of people. He was fourth on the team this year in receiving. He finished this season with 31 receptions for 330 yards. Now, remember, this was Parker's third year at LSU. He redshirted back in 2023. And then last year in 2024, he was when Chris Hilton got injured in fall camp, Kyle Parker was the guy who took Chris Hilton's reps as the deep receiver when Hilton was injured. So against USC in the opener in Vegas, that was Kyle Parker. Remember, Parker injured a bone in his hand. It sort of limited him a season ago. And then he came back this year, and with some big opportunities when he had them, made the most, namely in the bowl game. Listen, he finished with a career-high 7 receptions, leading LSU's receivers in the bowl game in catches. So he's a guy that you could look at with Aaron Anderson and Xavier Thomas and Berrien Brown all leaving to say that's next. Like, he's going to be the next guy. But I want to remind you of this, okay? Lane Kiffin knows what his offense is and is going to be, okay? And he knows what he wants, in particular at his skill positions in this offense. And this shouldn't be lost. Go back with me to signing day. What was one of the first things we saw? We saw Kenny Darby not retained. Kenny Darby was a Louisiana guy who had been committed to LSU for more than a year, passed on overtures from Bama and others. And the new staff didn't honor Kenny Darby's scholarship. What did they do? They immediately flipped Corey Barber from Ole Miss. Braden Allen, they flipped from Oklahoma. Lane Kiffin knows what he wants. When the season ended, who were the first 2 players from LSU that we saw announce they were entering the transfer portal? Kylan Billiot, Jelani Watkins, 2 receivers. The point is, Lane Kiffin knows what he wants at receiver. He knows what he wants at these skill positions. He knows what he wants at quarterback and running back and receiver. So when you look at Ole Miss and that roster, we've talked about it here. There's several players on that roster that they have openly discussed being targets by LSU. Now, you're not going to hear coaches talk about this on the record, nor should you, because that part isn't legal, but all of these conversations are being had with agents. So I am going to talk about what I know about some of these Ole Miss potential targets in just a second, like in our final segment here. But suffice to say, if Lane Kiffin really believed that Kyle Parker was an amazing add for this team and someone they desperately needed or wanted, then yeah, you could see a scenario where he would have been back. But ultimately, what happened is they're looking at the roster, doing their evaluations, and prioritizing who they want. And if Kyle Parker wanted to come back, maybe at a lesser valuation, maybe that opportunity wouldn't have been there. But the other point that I would mention is when you look at who LSU is targeting in the transfer portal, particularly from Ole Miss, and there's 2 receivers in particular we're going to talk about in a second, the opportunities may not necessarily be there for the returning receivers to be able to be featured and break out. So it makes a lot of sense actually for Kyle Parker. If in fact LSU is going to get the guys out of the portal, they think that they're going to get, in particular, from Ole Miss. Now this is complicated because Ole Miss is beating Georgia and is advancing to the college football playoff semifinal. And so the timing of this gets a bit more complicated and complex. So Kyle Parker was one that announced he's going in the portal. Joel Rogers is another. Listen, he's a second-year safety from the state of Louisiana, hasn't played a lot. That's not a big surprise. Donovan Green is the other. And by the way, if you're an everydayer, shout out. You heard me mention Donovan Green on a previous episode as a few players that we still are hearing could well go in the portal. Donovan Green was one of them. Nick Anderson is one of them. Caden Durham certainly could be one of them as well, depending on what happens with some of these Ole Miss guys that we're going to talk about in just a quick second. But Donovan Green does make you thinner at tight end. We got to see what happens with Trey'Dez. And maybe this for some is burying the lead, but I was told the good news is LSU is getting closer to a deal with Trey'Dez Green to return. It's one of the ones they prioritized among the 5 that they prioritized, like I mentioned. And Trey'Dez, what I was told, is not giving LSU the hometown discount, which he did the first 2 years that he was in Baton Rouge, and he's going to get his market value or above it. And so, as I understand it, he was offered a couple of numbers to return to LSU, which he declined. And it sounds like now they've gone back to him again with a number that is going to make sense for Trey'Dez Green. So at this point, I would say it is an overwhelming likelihood that Trey'Dez Green will end up back at LSU, which was not a certainty for sure, even just 24, 48 hours ago. So aside from Trey'Dez Green, you do have J.D. LaFleur, who's a legacy. You did sign one tight end in the high school signing class as well this year, who was a late add, flipping from Ole Miss in this signing class. So it will be. Forgive me, I was trying to get the name of the tight end that signed in the signing class. My apologies. It escaped me. It was J.C. Anderson out of Illinois. J.C. Anderson out of Illinois was the late add at tight end when Lane Kiffin came in. So that'll be your tight end room for 2026. And when we have an official word on Trey'Dez Green, we'll share it with you. But again, LSU, it sounds like their third offer that they went to Trey'Dez Green with is going to be good enough to get him back in Baton Rouge. But all that still to be determined as the transfer portal opens. Now, it's here. The day that Lane Kiffin, quite literally from his introductory press conferences, talked about, tweeted about, mentioned his opportunity, the self-proclaimed portal king, to build this roster via the transfer portal. So what does Ole Miss winning mean for LSU, and who are the targets? I'll tell you what I know as we wrap up Locked on LSU, your team every day. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday before the game tips off, FanDuel gives new fans a way to kick off, or fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. It's easy to check the weekly specials before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. So before tip-off, the FanDuel app, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern, a little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Ole Miss advancing to the college football playoff semifinal has certainly complicated things for LSU in this portal mix. Now, I want to be so abundantly clear because we talk in terms loosely that sometimes things can be misconstrued. Remember that it is not okay or allowed for coaches to speak to players before they're formally in the transfer portal. So all the conversations that we talk about are held between coaches and GMs and things like that, and agents and reps, not players specifically. Okay. We know that Ole Miss has accused LSU and Lane Kiffin of tampering with Ole Miss players. That's the Ross Dellinger report. I've heard those same intimations. I don't think anything's going to come of it from the NCAA. We did a full episode on this a couple of days ago. You can go check that out if you're interested. But one thing that's evident is obviously Lane Kiffin is going to want to bring some of his players from Ole Miss to Baton Rouge. And there are some players that, as we understand, are interested in following Lane Kiffin, certainly to play with Kiffin and Weiss, and also because LSU is stroking enormous checks. Now, I did an episode where I talked about the transfer portal targets at quarterback, and Trey'Dez Green is still the guy that LSU wants. There's no doubt about that. And I reported that the number LSU is willing to pay is just shy of $4 million. And my understanding as of today is that Ole Miss was not willing to match that. So what most likely is going to happen is if Trey'Dez Green gets another year of eligibility, he'll enter the transfer portal and end up at LSU. That would be the most probable scenario. But there's two very important variables now that we have to mention. Number one is there's no guarantee he gets the waiver. And so if he is waiting on this waiver, does LSU proceed as if they're going to get Trey'Dez Green, or do they say we have to go pursue other options? That's a very tricky part of this. The other now is the timing, okay? The transfer portal window is open from January 2nd to January the 16th. It's a 2-week window. It's a 2-week portal window. Now remember, players don't have to commit to a school or transfer to a school in that window. They just have to put their name in the portal in that window if they intend to transfer. So that's an important caveat here. Well, Ole Miss's win means now they're going to play on January the 8th in the Fiesta Bowl. That's next Thursday, January the 8th, a week from New Year's Day. So January 8th, a week from their win over Georgia. They'll play in the Fiesta Bowl. So the portal will be a week old at that point. And you're going to have dominoes falling. You're going to have players entering the portal and committing to signing with other schools between now and January the 8th. So what if Ole Miss beats Miami on January the 8th and advances to the national championship game? The national championship game is on January the 19th. Well, the portal will be closed by that point. So if Ole Miss wins on January the 8th and advances to play January 19th in the national championship game, that means that if Ole Miss players do intend to leave Ole Miss, they will have to put their name in the portal before they play in the national championship game. Like, this is a reality, depending on when you watch or listen to this, that there could be Ole Miss players still with the team, getting ready to play in the college football playoff semifinal against Miami in the Fiesta Bowl, that are going to put their name in the transfer portal while getting ready for the semifinal game. It's a bonkers thing. And college football, as we all said, they have wrecked this because of their cockamamie schedule. I mean, there is a way to do it. You start the season a week earlier, you play throughout, you start the playoff immediately in December, and then New Year's Day, you crown a national champion. Like, that's possible, schedule-wise. It's very doable. And then as soon as that ends, coaches leave, and then a short time after that, the portal opens. That's possible. It's not that this weirdly concocted thing. That's a reality that could happen, but it's not the reality now. And I'll tell you, so going back to the Kyle Parker conversation, for example, there are two receivers at Ole Miss that I'm told LSU is interested in, that there is mutual interest. And offers, by the way, that are high 6 to low 7-figure offers. And that's for Winnie Watkins and Deuce Alexander. So those two receivers at Ole Miss that are still playing for Ole Miss are two guys that are very likely, as I understand it, to enter the portal and end up playing at LSU based on agent conversations that have already been had with LSU and those two players' agents. And I was told numbers. I have two sources that have confirmed these numbers for me. I hesitate to give them out, but to be exact, but suffice to say, they are both, for Deuce Alexander and Winnie Watkins, right at 7 figures. One is just below, one is just above. So if Ole Miss isn't willing to step up and pay those numbers, and I shared with you that Trey'Dez Green's number that LSU is willing to pay is close to $4 million, which, by the way, that's $4 to $6 million is going to be the going rate
for starting quarterbacks in the portal right now anyway. Like we learned that last year with Carson Beck. And just that's what the market is. Those are two that are worth watching. I've already talked to you about Kewan Lacey, the running back. I've said this number on the record. I don't mind saying it again. Ole Miss has offered him $1.8 million. LSU, I'm told, will go above that to get him, and he's expected to go in the portal and join LSU as well. But again, now they're getting set to play. Every game that they play in advance, it complicates this even further because of the schedule. Now, another player that's worth mentioning that I've mentioned to you before is Carniero, the place kicker from Ole Miss, who transferred to Ole Miss from Western Kentucky. And if you watched the Georgia game, you saw him drilling 55, 56-yarders, hit in the middle of the net. I mean, kicks would have been good from 70. He was incredible. I'm told LSU had a mid six-figure offer, probably around $400,000 on the table for Carniero. And as I understand it, the likelihood now is he stays at Ole Miss. Again, all of this could change. But the other piece of news that you probably saw on New Year's Day is this was from Graham Hall, who reported that Florida kicker Evan Noel, who's the number one kicker in the country in 2025, intends to enter the transfer portal. He was recruited to Florida by Joe Houston, who is now the special teams coordinator at LSU. So if, in fact, LSU does not land Carniero from Ole Miss, which it seems like now they will not, keep an eye on Evan Noel from Florida as the likely portal target. I think I got it all. Okay, the portal is open. I fully anticipate this is going to be bonkers, and we are going to follow it every step of the way here as LSU rebuilds their roster for 2026. And what we hope will be a championship caliber roster. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every single day for Locked on LSU. It's your team every day.